billion, which is a 10% decrease from 2019's appropriated level. This reduction is similar to last year's request and the year before that as well. I acknowledge that you rejected those recommendations. I also acknowledge that it's easier to keep spending, to keep saying yes, and to keep saddling tomorrow's generations with today's growing debt. But as it's been said, the government will run out of other people's money. Over the past 40 years, federal taxpayer spending on education has increased about 180%, amounting to over $1.2 trillion cumulatively. And yet we're still 24th in reading, 25th in science, and 40th in math when compared to the rest of the world. Doing the same thing, and more of it, won't bring about new results. I propose a different approach: freedom. This budget focuses on freedom for teachers, freedom for parents, freedom for all students. A great education shouldn't be determined by where you live or by who you know, and it shouldn't be determined by family income. And education shouldn't be an old-school, industrial-age, one-size-fits-all approach. Every student is unique, and everyone learns differently. Every child should be free to learn where and how it works for them, where and how it unlocks their potential. That's why the President's 2020 budget proposes a historic investment in America's students: education freedom scholarships. Our bold proposal will offer a dollar-for-dollar federal income tax credit for voluntary contributions to 501c3 nonprofit organizations that provide scholarships to school students, not school buildings. These students, their families, teachers, schools, states, can choose to participate in the program, or they can elect not to participate. It's a choice. And since the proposal relies entirely on voluntary contributions to nonprofit organizations, it won't take a single dollar from local public school teachers or public school students. Indeed, our budget maintains current levels of funding for Title I and IDEA. Something else: education freedom scholarships aren't only for students who want to attend private schools. In fact, some states may choose to design scholarships for public school options, such as apprenticeships or transportation to a different public school. States have the opportunity to be really imaginative and to serve the unique needs of their students. We don't have to look far to see that education freedom works. Thanks to a menu of options and the DC Opportunity Scholarship Program, embraced by teachers, parents, and students alike, more than half of students in the district attend schools other than their assigned one, and there is still significant unmet demand. We propose Congress double the DC program's funding to $30 million to meet those students' needs. This administration believes students of all ages should be free to pursue multiple pathways to higher education and successful careers. That's why this budget proposes to expand use of Pell Grants for quality short-term programs. It also invests in career and technical education and streamlines student loan repayment. The latter is urgently necessary because today federal student aid holds $1.5 trillion in outstanding loans, more than total auto debt and credit card debt. And 43% of those loans are either in default, more than 30 days delinquent, or are negatively amortized. And taxpayers are on the hook for it all. This budget consolidates numerous repayment plans and raises the cap on a borrower's monthly payment to 12.5% of discretionary income. This is one way the federal government can become a more responsible lender. Policies should not entice students into greater debt, nor should they put taxpayer dollars at greater risk. Education freedom isn't just for parents and students. Teachers need greater freedom as well. We seek to empower America's teachers and elevate their profession via this budget with a new total investment of $370 million. I regularly meet with a number of excellent teachers who tell me they'd like to choose their own professional development and customize it for their needs. To that end, the budget requests an increase of $170 million to focus on development that's controlled by teachers, not dictated by the district office. These are teacher vouchers, and they treat teachers as the professionals they are. Teachers also tell me about the value of mentors or residency opportunities. So we're requesting $200 million to enable new teachers more opportunities to learn from the best. It's also essential that teachers and students be safe at school. In the wake of tragic acts of school violence in our country, President Trump asked me to lead a federal commission on school safety. To support the commission's recommendations, we request $200 million to help communities develop their own school emergency plans and to focus on counseling and healthy behaviors for their students. In the end, budgets are about priorities. Ours are students, parents, teachers, and taxpayers. If our country is to remain secure, strong, prosperous, and free, we need students of all ages who are prepared to pursue successful careers and lead meaningful lives. Thank you for this opportunity to testify. I look forward to your questions.
Thank you very much, Madam Secretary. My view full of cruel cuts to education programs, it baffles me that you found room for a $60 million increase to the charter school program, or CSP, especially when you consider recent reports of waste and abuse in that program. Just this morning, Washington Post published reports that up to $1 billion in CSP funding has been wasted on charter schools that never opened or precipitously closed due to mismanagement. In September, the OIG found that the department did not provide effective oversight of processes performed by the states that receive CSP funding when their charter schools close. In response to the IG's findings, the department stated, and I quote, "The fundamental principle for guiding states' implementation of charter schools is to provide charter schools increased levels of autonomy so they may innovate in exchange for increased flexibility in implementing applicable requirements," end quote. In other words, it sounds like you are saying, quote, "This is not our job." Can you explain how you think stopping known waste, fraud, and abuse in the charter school program is not the department's job? Why cannot states both follow federal laws and promote innovation when it comes to charter schools?
Chairwoman, we're very aware of the issues that this report raised, and it actually covers practices that long predate this administration. The fact Congress took action to address these concerns, and it was prior to the reauthorization of ESEA. We are very keen to ensure that the concerns raised are addressed, and we are also looking to this body for more flexibility for charters to be able to authorize the schools that are working for
Madam Secretary, it would appear to me that based on this report and other reports, that the charter schools have enormous flexibility. And there seems to be no one who is overseeing how that flexibility translates into the use of federal dollars. You are also now proposing this increase of $60 million. We're looking at $500 million for entities that they're just going their way. Let's be flexible. Let's let them do what they want. They don't open, they close, no one concerns about any of the students as well. That's irresponsible in terms of your job with regard to oversight. And as it has to do with federal taxpayers' dollars, that is the charge of this subcommittee, to make sure that those monies are being monitored and that you are accountable and not asleep at the wheel for what is happening with charter schools in this country. We've spent a lot of time and money in this effort. Let me also talk to you about a K-12 education office. Children, families, count on your support to deal with the ESSA. I am disappointed to hear reports about your mismanagement of the Office of Elementary and Secondary Education. 2016, it would appear you merged OESE and the Office of Innovation and Improvement, had 328 employees. We're down to OESE, has just 260 employees, nearly 21% staff reduction. There are a lot of press reports out there, and I quote, describe long waits for answers to technical questions, harried staffers, lack of overall support, technical know-how, including when it comes to improving schools. Do you see it as your responsibility to help states to implement ESSA? What is your message to states complaining that the lights are off at your Department of Education? I might also add, I believe there was a contract awarded to look at morale in the department. So.
Well, Chairman, let me just comment on your previous question. And I would just say with regard to charter schools, what we need is more charter schools and more options for children, not less. And states are proving time and again that there are wonderful options that are being developed for children of every learning type and interest, and we need more of them, not less. And when you have experimentation, you're always going to have schools that don't make it, and that's exactly as what should happen. They should close, and let's also look at how many traditional public schools have closed because they're not doing well for their students. Charter schools are a great option for thousands and thousands of students, and the demand for more of them remains very high. So we need more of them, not fewer. With regard to the department and our organization there, we have undertaken an effort to organize around the ability to be cohesive and effective in the work that we do for all of K-12 schools. And bringing in innovation and ingenuity into elementary and secondary education needs to happen no matter where the education is taking place. I'm very, very proud of the work of the department and the Office of Elementary and Secondary Education in the implementation of the Every Student Succeeds Act.
Madam Secretary.
They've been doing a great job. We've approved all of the...
Madam Secretary, let me just say that you are taking public dollars to open charter schools, and you're taking money away from our public schools, which is where 90% of our children are.
Madam Chairman,
and what you're doing is shortchanging them. And I would just say, some of them, if you take a look at the data and the information, we're looking at the transference to private entities, private corporate boards. They open, they close, they don't, some of them don't even open, and we are spending good money after bad, and in addition to that, you don't seem to think that there's a necessity to oversee it, to claim any accountability for it. It's God's in his heaven, all's right with the world. It's not true. We are wasting money there.
And charter schools are public schools.
My time is
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you, Madam Chair. If we may, I actually want to pick up on that because I want to ask you a little bit more about it. I'm a big supporter of charter schools, and we've had, working with your office, frankly, substantial increases. So if you would, why don't you report on some of the successes that you've had in this area?
Well, thank you, Chairman, or Ranking Member Cole. Thank you for the question to elaborate a little bit more on the value of charter schools to students today. We are seeing across the country, I think with the exception of 4 states, charter schools have been able to grow up in 46 out of the 50 states. And for students, it has been a wonderful alternative. We know that there are tens of thousands, if not hundreds of thousands of students who want to have an alternative to their assigned public school, and charter schools often provide that opportunity. I have visited all types of schools. And it doesn't really matter how a school is organized to me. What matters is whether the students going to that school find the right fit for themselves and are able to pursue their learning and education in a way that really draws the best out of them. We need to continue to build on that, and that's why this budget proposes an expansion in the commitment of funding to charter schools to continue to support high-quality options for students. every state has high accountability provisions, varying accountability for provisions for their charter schools, and do a good job, I think, of overseeing them at that level. We also do at the Department of Education, but the most important point of accountability are the parents who've chosen to send their child to whatever that charter school is. And we're going to continue to see great results from students who are able to pursue their education in those settings.
Well, I appreciate your work in this regard. I too visit schools pretty frequently, public and charter. I've got great public schools. I've got some great charter schools, and I think you're right about the allowing parents to choose the best path and children to choose to participate in that decision. Let me ask you, one of the things I was very pleased with in the budget was your proposals in career and technical education. Both, I hear more from employers in my district about the need for folks with skills, and frankly, I meet so many children and young people that this is the way they want to go as opposed to traditional four-year college education. So 2 areas I'd ask you to elaborate on that you proposed. The first is your $20 million STEM competition proposal and how you see that incentivizing and building into career and technical. And second, this idea of using Pell Grants for shorter-term credentialed programs. How would that work? That's actually something I've always been supportive of, but never found a way to finance because I think the demand would be just tremendous. But I'm interested in your proposals in both those areas.
Well, thanks for those questions. Yes, this administration is a huge proponent of supporting alternative pathways to higher education, and career and technical education is a very important piece of that equation, and in fact is an expanding area, I think. I think one of the major hurdles is for us to perceptually, and I say us, speaking as a parent, parents often don't view career and technical opportunities as valid as, because for decades we've been told only four-year college and university is the path to success. Well, we've got to get beyond that because today we have over 7 million jobs going unfilled that require education beyond high school, but not necessarily a four-year degree. So to your question specifically about the $20 million investment in STEM occupations and STEM pathways, we know that there are huge opportunities from a career perspective in the areas of math and science, and particularly in computer science. So that also couples with the proposal for short-term Pell. Short-term Pell would allow for high-quality certificate and certification programs to be accessed where today students with receiving Pell Grants cannot access them. And one of the question around funding for them, I think there's a little bit of presumption going on with the math that this would be an additive program. I suspect there are a great many Pell Grant eligible students who would opt to take one of these short-term Pell opportunities in lieu of perhaps a longer-term, more traditional route. And so I think we would see a trade-off for many of those options, and I think we need to take that step, I would argue, because there are so many great opportunities for short-term.
Again, I want to work with you, and I'm out of time, so we'll pursue this another time. But I would be very interested as you go forward, any information you have back on the specifics, or you're going to limit it to certain skill sets or whatever. But again, I think it's a great idea, great place to start. Thank you, Madam Chair. Yield back.
On this report, U.S. government wasted up to $1 billion on charter schools and still fails to adequately monitor grants. Now yield to the gentlelady from New York, Mrs. Lowy.
Madam Secretary, your agency recently conducted a report on 21st century community learning centers that concluded half of the students who participated in these after-school activities improved their math and reading grades. More than 68% improved their homework and class participation, and 3 out of 5 improved their classroom behavior. Last year, much to my surprise, you proposed the elimination of these after-school programs, Congress, under a Republican majority, not only rejected the administration's cuts last year, but increased after-school investments by $10 million. This year, I'm puzzled, you're trying to cut it again, completely ignoring the strong evidence that parents support this program and, in fact, want more of it. Could you tell me, why does your budget yet again prioritize cutting this very important program and very popular program, while your own study proves it's successful and Congress has demonstrated its strong bipartisan support for it?
Well, thank you, Chairwoman, for that question. Actually, the data that we have shows very differently, and the funds coming from the federal level do not really show significant impact on the students that it's meant to serve. The dollars flowing out of the federal program are not getting to programs that are working really well on behalf of the students, and there's not great participation rates. In fact, data from 2017 suggests that only 25% of elementary school program participants improved in their reading, and only 19% of middle and high school students improved and made gains in math. The proposal in the budget is we had to make difficult decisions in the budget in our proposals, and remember, they're just proposals to you. But in doing so, we have really focused in on the things that we know are really yielding results and are getting to the students that are most vulnerable and need it most. So our proposal to eliminate 21st century learning funding doesn't speak to the program itself as much as it does to priorities, and also to the fact that the funding that we have been required to make through this 21st century federal level programming does not show the results for the students. Perhaps some of the state and local community level support does, and there's lots of philanthropic support around after-school programs, but the funding from the Department of Education has not shown to be as effective.
Well, I'm not going to get into a debate with you now. I'm glad that you said this is just a proposal, because you could be sure that many of us who serve on this committee and visit these local programs understand how effective and how important they are. So I wish you'd give some more thought to them, and I wonder if you have visited many of them. I've been a supporter of these for a long time, and they're really life-saving for many of these kids in the communities. Another important, in fact, for me, it's been essential in many of our schools. Your budget proposes to roll back significant progress we've made in this subcommittee on a bipartisan basis to increase investments in child care access means parents and schools. It's called C-Campus Initiative. The only federal program that supports child care access on campus for low-income parents working towards a higher education. A year ago today, the president advisor, Ivanka Trump, tweeted out her support for the C-Campus program. Now, I'm not saying that Ivanka Trump is an expert in this, but her father seems to respond favorably to her opinions. Would you say that her tweet on this program signaled the administration's support for C-Campus?
Well, we, again, had to make many difficult decisions in presenting this budget, and we have suggested the elimination or reduction of a number of programs. And we have continued to stay focused on the ones that are really serving the most vulnerable students. Title IX or Title I funding has been held even. IDEA funding held even. English language learner funding held even. And those are funds that can be used also for children that we're talking about, not in the same way, granted, but definitely flexibility in how these funds are used. And again, we've made choices in this budget and are presenting our proposals to you for consideration.
Well, I have two other questions about this, if I may ask them just quickly. But maybe that's why you shouldn't be proposing a cut in your overall budget, because I wonder if you've seen these programs and see how critical they are to many of our communities. And I wonder, has the Department of Education studied the impact these cuts would have on the 5,000 parents who would lose access to on-campus childcare? And I'd like to see the data to predict how this elimination would impact degree completion. My time is up, but I would hope you can respond to me. I've been to these schools. I've worked with these schools. I see the impact. I see the impact on the parents and on their kids, and this is such an valuable program. I know we're going to reconsider it, and I would hope you would educate yourself about this program as well. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Congressman Molinar.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Secretary DeVos, thank you for being here with us and appreciated your overview and the work you're doing. A few things I wanted to just comment on. One is you've done a great service today by clarifying that charter schools are public schools. In Michigan law, we call them public school academies. I was a former charter school administrator, and I think one of the biggest misconceptions is that somehow charter schools are not public schools, and I thank you for doing that today. It's something that I've seen tremendous things in Michigan. It's part of Detroit's comeback, some of the charter schools there that are giving parents and their families opportunities in an area where they aren't being served. And so I appreciate your advocacy. I wondered if you would speak a bit more about some of the proposals you have on expanding options for school choice for families. And also, if you would, explain to us who benefits from that. What's the type of student, who really benefits from that?
Well, thank you, Congressman. Appreciate that question very much. The main proposal that this administration is advancing is called Education Freedom Scholarships, and it would create a federal tax credit that capped at $5 billion annually that states could elect to participate in or not. If they did elect to participate, they would create programs or augment programs that they already have existing in their state and would give access to families as they decide. So most programs today that in states are means tested, and most students that today are benefiting from school choice education freedom programs are students that are vulnerable, that have been stuck in schools that aren't working for them. Their families can't move somewhere else like so many others can. They cannot buy a home in the suburbs where a good school is. And so it gives these children opportunities that they haven't had before. And the beauty with the Education Freedom Scholarships proposal and initiative is contributions to it are voluntary. Nobody's coercing anyone to give. Nobody's coercing any state to participate, and nobody's coercing any family to participate in the programs that the states create. What it will do is give a lot of children, hundreds of thousands of children across the country, the opportunity to find an education fit that's going to be right for them.
And you know, one of the concerns that was raised earlier is you know, school violence, you know, threats to student safety, student achievement. I mean, if you're a parent in an area where you don't have a school district that you feel your children are safe or they aren't meeting the needs academically, I would think that this would be a big positive for them.
It would indeed. In fact, I would cite a program that Florida recently enacted called, I think it's called the Hope Scholarships Program, for students who are bullied in their assigned school and or are have acts of violence committed against them, they are able to find a school that will work for them through this Hope Scholarships program. So states could elect to adopt something like this, and Florida could elect to augment the program that they have. But giving parents and students options to find the right educational fit for each child, I think is an imperative.
And then I wanted to also follow up, and Mr. Cole was mentioning some of the, ideas around the Pell grants and some of the short-term Pell. One of the things I'm experiencing in my district as I meet with owners of businesses, manufacturers, consistently they're saying, we could hire more people. We just need to have people with the right skills. We would love to have some kind of a certificate training program. In my home area, there's a company that, it's a chemical company. They have a fast start program with a community college where it's a intensive short-term program, and then these are very good paying jobs once they get in. Is this kind of what you're looking at for the short-term Pell?
Yes, indeed. And I think it's a great opportunity in communities and regions for employers to work with educators and really come up with proposals that are going to work for the employer's needs, and that educators will be able to come in alongside of them and help create the kind of curriculum that is going to be absolutely perfect for the situation that that particular community or that region needs. And yes, this is exactly what a short-term Pell proposal could help to address.
Okay. Thank you very much. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you. Congresswoman Lee.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Madam Chair, and my ranking member for this hearing. Welcome, Madam Secretary. Madam Secretary, you remember Steve Bannon, right? Steve Bannon indicated that the Trump administration's goal was to deconstruct the administrative state. And each cabinet official who comes to this committee presents budget that really reflect that agenda. And your budget reflects what exactly Steve Bannon said: privatizing public education, getting rid of the public sector, turning it over to the corporations and the private sector to ensure the quality public education that our young people deserve. And it's outrageous. Your cuts here specifically target students of color. It's unbelievable, low-income students. And I just have to say, Madam Secretary, you have zeroed out Special Olympics once again. I still can't understand why you would go after disabled children in your budget. You zero that out. It's appalling. I want to ask you a couple of things, which again reflects exactly what I just said. 2 years ago, I wrote into the language into the bill about school desegregation. The language asks for a report from your department in coordinates of civil rights to submit to this committee detailing recommendations on how to address the adverse impacts of segregation, including Title VI school monitors, to ensure that every student has the opportunity for an equal education. Madam Secretary, this letter came, we wrote it June 7th. We've called, we've asked for this report, we've tried to reach you over and over again. We've never received a response. I wonder where this report is. Could you let us know when this report will be coming to the committee? It's about students of color. It's about school desegregation efforts.
Congresswoman, yes, I'm aware of that request and that report, and I know it's near completion, and I commit to you that we will get that to you as soon as feasible.
Madam Secretary, this is almost 2 years. We've been waiting. These kids deserve, and the school district deserve, an answer from our Secretary of Education. We can't wait 2 years to get a report on school desegregation from you. It shouldn't be that hard to do. And the response has been awful in terms of trying to get some sense of timing and why this has been delayed. Next, let me ask you about the school disciplinary practices that impact Black and Latino students. According to data released by the Department of Ed's Office of Civil Rights, Black K-12 students and Latino students are 3 times likely to be suspended or expelled as their white peers. But now the federal Commission on School Safety, which you chair, eliminated the 2014 school discipline guidance, which ensured that students of color are not subject to harsher disciplinary practices than their white peers. The guidance provided valuable resources for districts. It provided continuous, vigorous federal oversight and enforcement of our civil rights laws to make sure that students' civil rights are upheld. 75 civil rights groups wrote to you in January expressing opposition to the rescission of this guidance. Why in the world would you blame, and I understand what the rationale was, blaming school shootings, the tragic gun violence that has taken place throughout the country, on the civil rights protections for students of color? It doesn't make any sense why that was part of this rescission. Can you explain that?
Well, Congresswoman, no child should be treated or disciplined differently based on his or her race or color or national origin. And if and when they are, our Office for Civil Rights will act swiftly, acted swiftly. Children need to be treated as individuals, not
But they're
as
not being
statistics.
treated as individuals. That's
They
why
are.
we had this order put in place. And you rescinded that.
Again, any student that is treated or disciplined differently because of his or her color or race
Madam
is going to
Secretary,
be- that
the
is
Department
not
of Civil Rights,
acceptable.
your own Department of Education, Office of Civil Rights indicated that students of color are suspended 3 times more than white students. We put into place some requirements that would begin to turn this around. You rescinded those requirements. So what
Again,
message
no
does this send to
student-
school
No
districts?
student should be treated or disciplined differently
But
based
Madam
on their
Secretary, they
race.
are treated differently. They are treated
No,
differently.
if they are, it's discrimination.
Well, then
The
why
Office
in the
for
world
Civil
would you
Rights and the Office for
rescind
Civil Rights,
the orders that would correct for this?
the letter amounted to quotas. Children are individuals, they're not
Madam
a
Secretary, this didn't-
statistic.
This didn't involve quotas. This gave direction on how to correct this horrible problem that we have throughout the country. You go to any community of color where you have schools that are trying to, with minimal resources, provide the best education they can, and you will see what is taking place. So this did not amount to quotas. This amounted to providing those tools and guidance to make sure that students' civil rights are protected. And you rescinded that.
Every community needs to be able to handle their classrooms and discipline in the way that works for them. And if
Madam
a
Secretary,
child-
thank God we
if
had
a
Brown
child-
versus Board of Education. The
and
federal
if a
government
child
gave
is
us a
treated
chance to go to
differently
public schools.
because
We
of his
needed
or
the
her
federal
race,
government to
the Office
provide
for
that
Civil Rights
oversight
will
for civil
address it.
rights protections.
Congresswoman Herrera Butler.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And thank you, Madam Secretary, for being here. You know, I have some questions. I am excited to hear your answers. I do appreciate your willingness to come and to share when I feel like, you know, there's a difference between asking a question and being tough and being somewhat, if I was sitting there and I was asked about what my boss's daughter thought about a proposal I was working on, I'd be a little bit annoyed. If I was being asked, how could you possibly be the Secretary of Education by, and then there's a long list. I just feel like I appreciate your willingness to do the job, even though you're being undermined as you sit there in many different instances. Again, vigorous disagreement. I think Chairman Cole shared that he had some disagreements, and I would share some of the disagreements, you know, with my friends on the other side of the aisle, but it's all how you do it, I think. So I appreciate your willingness very much. First piece I wanted to ask about has to do with mental health. Teachers in my area, Southwest Washington, have shared with me that they see mental health, the crisis of mental health, impacting individual students, classrooms, and communities as a whole. And this cuts across wealthy classrooms, you know, urban districts, rural districts, poor and impoverished districts. I mean, this is no respecter of persons, so to speak. And we're seeing a critical need, really, to provide mental and behavioral health support. And I say we, the community. I mean all of us. This is the whole nation here. But as in your role, does the department have any emphasis on supporting schools and providing this support?
Thanks for that question, Congresswoman. Yes, so the School Safety Commission made a number of recommendations, and among them that were specific to the Department of Education really had to do with improving the school climate, social and emotional learning, mental health issues, and one of the proposals in our budget is a new $100 million school safety state grant program that could be used by states and by communities to implement a mental health program that is appropriate for their school, for their community. And we know that this is an issue that is not unique to any one type of community. And we know that the climate of a school is so important. And having visited many schools in the past couple of years, you know when you enter the school if they're being intentional about creating a positive school climate. And we think that this is one important way that we can help states really help their local communities meet specific needs specific to their communities.
Thank you. Because I imagine it's going to look differently, a solution. I think about some of my different schools, small, rural, more urban, increasingly suburban. The solutions might look a little different. Seclusion and restraint. I was just reading an article in my area where there are parents talking about having their 6-year-old held down by the neck while the classroom's cleared, and that was the school solution to dealing with some of the behavioral issues. And I know the department announced an initiative on this, particularly when it comes to providing care, education, safety for children with disabilities. Can you tell me a little bit about the initiative?
Yeah. Well, let me just begin by saying that, every student needs to be able to go to school safe themselves, and other students to be safe in their setting as well. And we have initiated an effort to really help school communities know and understand the law with regard to seclusion and restraint, and then to help ensure that they have the tools necessary to be able to carry out the law in a fashion that is in line with what the intent of it is. And we've also launched an investigation, and this is a joint effort between our Office for Civil Rights and our Office of Special Education, and it is to go and look at some areas where the numbers that have been reported just seem a little bit out of line for some reason, and to really go and understand whether these are accurate reports, and if not, to help them know and understand, again, what their obligations are. We think that this is a really important initiative that we've undertaken without having some kind of a mandate being told to do so.
I appreciate that, and I yield back. Thank you.
Congressman Pocan.
Great. Thank you, Madam Chairman and our committee chairman. Thank you for being here. Thank you so much, Secretary, for being here today. I'd like to try to get to 3 or 4 areas, so if we can be concise, I'd really appreciate it. I do want to follow up on something Ms. Lee asked. When she asked about suspensions, you repeated a few times race, religion, national origin. I noticed you never mentioned sexual orientation or gender identity. Do you think it's all right for a school to discriminate based on someone's sexual orientation or gender identity?
We have laws that cover discriminatory efforts, and our Office for Civil Rights has continued to be very diligent in investigating any allegation of discrimination, and will continue to do so.
So is that a yes or is that a no? I'm trying to get a yes or no, I guess, on that.
We follow the law as this
So personally,
body
you don't have an opinion on
has
it?
defined, and
Because you are giving money, so it leads me to the next question. You are giving money to some charter schools that do discriminate, and that report, I'd like to follow up from our chairwoman's question, where $1 billion has been wasted with 1,000 schools going to charter schools. 1 out of every 4 have failed, and I know in your testimony you thought we should have more charter schools, but when you have a 25% failure rate, that'd be like saying if one of your car tires keeps going flat, rather than replacing it, you're going to add more tires to a car. I don't know if that makes a lot of sense, but my question would be, what are you doing specifically to get that $1 billion back for taxpayers? And you have in this budget a $60 million increase, a 14% increase for this program when we have 1 out of every 4 failing. How can you address those two aspects of that?
Well, let me just refer again to the fact that the report covered information from a longer
Sure,
period
but my
of time
question, if I can,
ago.
just because I want to get a couple more
And,
subject areas in, please, Madam Secretary.
I will go to the fact again that we need more charter schools, not fewer of them.
Okay, so what are we
And
doing to
need-
get
and we
money
need-
back for taxpayers? Let's try that one first.
We need traditional public schools
Okay,
to
let's
be
go.
held
No,
to the same
I'm sorry, excuse me,
accountability
Madam Secretary,
standards.
just because I'm trying to save time. So what are we doing to get the money back for taxpayers, the $1 billion that got wasted?
I'm not sure that that's the ultimate conclusion, but we'll certainly look into.
Are we doing anything to get the money
We'll
back?
certainly look into that. And
we're not
as a
doing
part-
anything to get the money
Context of
back.
that report.
This is interesting how we ask questions. I feel like I'm speaking a different language. I'm sorry. Okay, so then the second part of that is we have an increase, yet we have the failure rate. All right, so let me go to another area, and I want to follow up on the thing Ms. Lee mentioned about the cuts to Special Olympics. Do you know how many kids are going to be affected by that cut, Madam Secretary?
Mr. Procan, let me just say again, we had to make some
Okay.
difficult decisions with this budget.
Again, this is a question on how
And
many kids, not about the budget.
I don't know the number of kids.
It's
I also know that
272,000 kids. That's all. Okay, I'll answer it for you. That's okay. No problem. It's
Let me just say that
272,000
I think
kids
Special
that are
Olympics is
affected.
an awesome organization, one that is well supported by the philanthropic sector as well.
Sure. I'll tell you,
And this
reclaiming
is
my
one-
time if I could, Madam Secretary, because there's a couple more parts to this. So also, we have cuts that go in the special education grants to states from $3 million to $2.2 million, a 26% cut. And then also in this budget, you have a $7.5 million cut to the National Technical Institute for the Blind, a $13 million cut for Gallaudet University, a $5 million cut for federal program for print books for blind students. And you recently had a federal judge rule against us on some areas around special education. I have 2 nephews with autism. What is it that we have a problem with children who are in special education? Why are we cutting all of these programs over and over within this budget?
Well, sir, we have continued to retain the funding levels for IDEA and held that level. So in the context of a
I'm sorry, I don't think I
in the
brought up
context-
IDEA. I believe I brought up Special Olympics, special education grants to states, the National Technical Institute for the Blind, Gallaudet University, federal program for printing books. So if you could address those, that's the question. I
But
would really appreciate it.
I will address the broader question around.
Or if you could
supporting
actually address
students
the
with
question I
special-
asked. That's even a better way to answer a question.
Supporting students with special needs, we have continued to hold that funding level, that funding at a level amount, and in the context of a budget proposal that is a 10% reduction.
All right, I'll reclaim my time. I'll reclaim my time. You're not going to answer the question. Let me try one last one. Maybe I'll get it. Maybe I'll do better than charter schools if I get this one covered by you. You've got a cut to the department that's a 12% agency cut, but you have a 15.6% increase in your executive salary appropriation. How can you justify that?
So the department funding includes a building modernization piece.
Yeah, I didn't ask about buildings.
Well, it's all part of that, it's all part of that budget.
So you're okay with a 12% agency cut in light of a 15.6% increase in executive salary? And by the way, I know it doesn't come out of this budget, but $7 million security expense in the last year.
So we are also funding the Next Gen initiative through federal student aid, which requires a lot of investment now to save in the longer term. Same thing for the building modernization piece. We are in the process of shrinking down the footprint here from 3 buildings to 2. And all of that, the expenditures come up front so that the savings can be realized in the longer term.
Yeah, Madam Chairwoman, I'm sorry I wasn't more clear in my questions. Thank you.
Thank you. Congressman Harris.
Thank you very much, and good to see you again, Madam Secretary. Let me just, and again, I've kind of asked the secretaries when they come before here to explain the president's budget. Now, you have to work within the current statute, right? And the current statute, we have to revert to the old caps. Is that correct?
That is my
hasn't-
understanding. Congressman, yes, that's my
Yeah,
understanding.
Congress hasn't raised the caps, so actually, why anyone up here on this side of this, this wall here, would think that the blame is not on us for not having given you the money to spend more. I mean, the bottom line is Congress is failing again. I mean, that's the bottom line. Look, I trust states and localities on education. Look, there's a basic philosophy that, and look, we're people on this side of the wall. Some of us are going to agree to disagree. That some people think the federal government knows best how to educate people in Somerset County. I have one of the 2 poorest counties in the state, and I like to think that my Board of Education and my local county and my state knows how to educate those students. And someone up here, hate to say it, you're part of the federal government, but hate to say it, I don't think the federal government knows best how to educate those students. So I agree with you. The turning over more things to the states, I think, is good. I also think that freedom is an American principle. I think freedom and choice are principles, and I think that charter schools embody that principle to a large extent. So I think that it was a great idea to highlight charter schools in your budget, and especially the state facilities incentive grants, because it always bothered me. I used to sit on the Education Committee in the state Senate in Maryland. It used to bother me that we'd talk about charter schools, and they would say, we'll give you money for the education, but we're not going to give you any money for a facility. Well, it's kind of hard to educate without a facility, but I guess that's the way the education establishment discourages charter schools. That's the way they do it, and good for you to point that out. Now, you testified that, and you're going to have to explain, give me these numbers again, the reading, science, and math, where we stand in the nation, and I'm sorry, in the world. Was it 24th in reading, 25th in science, 40th in math, or did I get one of those numbers wrong?
No, 24th in reading, 25th in science, and 40th in math.
40th in math. So this is after 40 years of federal involvement. And where did we stand in 1979 before the federal government went in to help the states educate Americans? If you could get back to me, if you could look that up, I'll bet you it wasn't.
Yes, I know we were much higher in the ranking, and we've definitely continued to deteriorate.
Right, so let's just step back and take the big picture. So 1979, we were better. Federal government says, so, it's the words of Ronald Reagan, the 9 most dangerous, however many words it is, I'm here from the federal government, I'm here to help. So the federal government came in to help education, and now we're much worse off. Well, Madam Secretary, I want to thank you for thinking outside the box and how to reverse some of that. And I do think some of the principles you have elucidated in the budget get to that. I do want to commend you, actually, because I've gone and spoken to teachers and parents in my district who worried a lot about the disparate impact policies of the previous administration, worried a lot about that effect on school discipline, and we're very grateful that this administration took a new look at those disparate impact policies. But I'd like you to expand a little bit, because I do think that one thing the federal government can do is expand the ability of states to be forward-thinking in how they provide alternative education for parents and students who choose not to be in a conventional public school, and explain the new approach you're going to take to encourage states to have these foundations that fund alternatives for parents.
Well, thanks, Congressman, for those comments and the question. This administration continues to support alternative pathways and acknowledges that more and more students are not traditional students, and we are going to have regular interface with education and learning throughout our adult lives, particularly children born today. When you think about the fact that a kindergartner today can look forward to entering a workforce where 85% of the jobs don't yet exist. So we have to be supporting lifelong learning in a way that is meaningful. That goes to some of the recommendations that we made around the Pell, a short-term Pell program, around